Hey, fellow traveler. Welcome to the Third Eye Awakening podcast, a show where we talk all about spiritual and psychic awakening, magic, the shift from 3D to 5D, star seeds, ascension, multiple timelines, multiple dimensions, the universe, the multiverse, the Akashic records, all the good things. I am your host, Amy Belair, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. Okay, let's do this. Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much for joining me for an episode of Third Eye Awakening. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. We were just talking about some of the events, the things that are going on because so Jennifer Longmore and I both live in Ontario, Canada, which doesn't make the news all that often on the global stage, did briefly during the truckers thing. But so we were just kind of talking about the things that are going on in our neck of the woods. And we were veering off into some interesting theories about what is happening, like kind of on the bigger picture perspective. And I think that would be a beautifully engaging conversation to share with the listeners, just what things have come through to you in the Akashic records, what things that you've heard, and kind of what you see as happening right now in the global setting.
Oh boy, so much. The first thing that comes to mind is last weekend, I took my family to Blue Jays game. Now, my mom is somewhat awake, although by allowing herself to be more awake would require her to make some decisions that I don't think she's willing to make. And I think she's an example of many people out there, right? It's kind of like why people don't want to grow their business because they are expecting their romantic partnership to shift, or they're expecting something bad to happen, right? So they don't want to, they only want to look at something in the eyes to a certain degree. But anyways, we go to this Blue Jay game. I want my son to have a memory with his dad and with my dad, and I want us to have a family memory. I'm going in knowing full well that this is an owned, compromised team, as with any professional sports. And so we're going downtown Toronto, and it's a pain in the ass, honestly, to go to downtown Toronto at any time, really, but especially during a Blue Jays game. Now, granted, it's fine because we're not in a rush and whatever. But we get there, and I can feel the consciousness in the stadium. I'm sure that probably 99.9% of people there have decided to inject themselves with poison just because of the way the consciousness is. And Amy, I know you get this too, and probably all of you listening, there's a certain vacancy that's present in people's eyes when they've had it. It doesn't mean they're fully vacant, but there's I see at least like a 25% dimming of the radiance in someone's eyes once they've had it. I can see it online now in people's pictures and so on, and definitely when I'm talking to people on Zoom. So we go in there, and of course, I'm struck with the inverted triangle that's a little bit fluffed up with a blue jay, right? So it's an inverted triangle made to look like a blue jay, but it's a side profile which just happens to have one eye, right? So I'm kind of laughing at this. I'm like, okay. And I'm, again, well aware of what's happening. It's a hot day. The dome is open. And it's just astounding to see in person, because it's been so long since I've been to one, seeing how purposely players were missing catches or purposely like swinging at, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it was just very obviously staged. It doesn't mean they're not skilled. Of course, they can throw a baseball 95 miles an hour, things like that. But it was very clear that these games are decided in advance because we know that people are betting on them. But there's this whole vibe in the dome, right? And it's almost full. And there's a lot of people that are masked, is my point. And we've had the mask mandates lifted for weeks. And Amy, you know how I feel about masks anyways. But anyways, I just think, holy shit, people, like, there's literally nothing essential about this. This is the most non-essential thing you can do. If you're that afraid, stay the F at home, right? Like, we're tired of you guys deciding that you get to go wherever you want. And those of us that are healthy and or not, manipulated by fear, have to stay at home so that you can go to your Blue Jay game and you can go to your casino and all of these things. But anyways, the consciousness was interesting, and just to watch it and watching the crowd thinking that if they booed loud enough, it would inspire the team to do better, or if they cheered loud enough that we would win. And they really thought that their energy was going to dictate the outcome of that game. And I just saw it as so reflective of what we're going on, what's happening in society anyways, right? It's just basically a metaphor for what's going on now. Interestingly, though, I had never had this feeling before. And I was sitting there and I thought, holy crap, like if they decided to do a false flag right now, we're screwed. The way that they've designed these stadiums, not just the Sky Dome, but
Mhm.
any anywhere, doesn't make for, if you look at these concerts where they've committed false flags and stuff, it's not easy to get out of there. And that
Mhm.
I've got to think it's designed for a reason because we know who designs these buildings, right? And yes, I know that sounds really sinister, but that's kind of who we're dealing with. And all of a sudden, I had this wave of something come over me like, oh, I don't know that it's going to be all that safe to be coming to these kind of events anymore. For us to think that that isn't going to happen in Toronto when we know there actually have been some false flags in Toronto over the last, let's say, 5 years, particularly, right? That recent or like relatively new thing or newsworthy things that have come to mind. Now, later that day, I happened to log into Facebook quickly because I needed to check on something. And right away on my thing said, it was one of my contacts on Facebook that said, Mark safe from the mass shooting in Philadelphia. And I realized, oh, they must have been sending out these comms through the radio waves, right? And created some sort of situation where this thing happened, which would have been the energy I was picking up on. Cause I've never been out in public anywhere feeling like, oh, I don't know that it's safe for me to be here, or are they going to be playing some games or whatever. But I got to thinking about just all of the ways that they're coming at us and what we get to pay attention to and what we don't. And I know you've heard some interesting theories back to what we were sharing about, how this is all going to play out. Like I definitely see that creating homelessness is going to be one of the things. I don't think it's any accident that they're manipulating the housing market to make it really unaffordable for people to buy, let alone rent. I mean, the rent, because of how high the mortgages are, just makes it such. And on top of that, the landlords have carte blanche right now. They can be so unbelievably picky. I mean, good luck if you have pets. Good luck if you have young children, right? And some of the more or some of the rents are just an astounding price for things that would have been maybe $1,000 before, right? So I think that's one of the ways they're going to do that. I think they're going to use weather warfare as another way to displace people. I think they will use war as another way to displace people. We're already seeing that. And then I think they're also going to really jack up utilities such that it becomes problematic to be able to stay either in a rental situation or a home ownership situation, right? Because like we're already seeing that. And they're using the gas, well, they're blaming the truckers essentially, right? Which we knew that was already a setup. But
Mhm.
they're blaming the gas prices on all of these other things needing to go up. Like I'm not entirely sure what gas prices have to do with the propane guy coming and filling up my propane tanks, for example. I'm not
Right.
really sure how that's related, but they tie it together and basically gaslight you, making you think that it's that issue, but it's really not. But I know that, well, we know that they're really on this climate change bullshit. Like, yes, the climate's changing, obviously, but it's not, it's not because of what we've done. It's because of the systems that they've created, right? And how they've manipulated that. And so we're seeing a lot of that play out. And I remember even 2 years ago, my husband, we live in the forest. He asked for a chainsaw for, I think, Christmas or something, right? So I said, well, what kind do you want? He said, gas. And I said, are you sure you want gas? I think they're going to, I don't know that gas is going to be an option much longer because I know they're starting to ban them in certain places. Why don't we get electrical? Oh, it's a pain in the ass. I'm like, well, humor me. I'll get you a gas one, but can I also get you an electric one? Because you and I, for example, know where that's going, but the majority of people, my husband included, are not aware of the agenda at all, right? And so he just thinks I'm a total wackadoo, and I think he only thinks he's doing me a favor by staying married to me, and that I'm mentally unwell, and I need him, or I'll fall into this black hole of whatever. But and interesting too, right? Because I know you get this because you see this with a lot of people, how fascinating it is, the partnerships we chose during this time.
Mhm.
right? Like it's pretty astounding that I have got the world under my roof. I am the card carrying conspiracy theory, you know, Freemason, anti Freemason, anti Church of Satan kind of person. And he's like, "What do you mean? Science is everything. Without science, what, we're so polarized in our beliefs and we still manage to make it work. It hasn't always been easy. Anyways, all that to say that I think they're going to just make it impossible for the average person to be able to stay where they're at. And also I think the flooding, well, I mentioned weather warfare, but I had mentioned to you that in our area, all of the insurance providers have secretly rescinded the flood clause or the flood coverage in people's insurance policies. And we happen to live in a flood zone. We have a lot of lakes around here. And so I find that interesting. But I do think that, like you and I have chatted about privately, I do think that they're going to do some sort of cataclysmic thing that we can't see coming.
Mm.
I think that I've often seen things falling from the sky. I've seen fake asteroids and whatever else they've created, right? That are gonna like literally collapse parts of the earth and make them go underwater, for example. I've heard that they'll be dropping missiles from the sky and creating really big tidal waves in the ocean, which would be significant to create it in the ocean, right? And the earthquake effects, earthquake
Mhm.
type effects that would come from that and the reverberation of that and how that would just disrupt, of course, so much. So I do, and then we, of course, hear about the 5G. I haven't paid much attention to the 5G. It's not that I don't believe in it. It's just not something that my guides bring to my radar. I think we're
Mm.
all sort of tasked with focusing on certain things. And for
Yeah.
me, I'm more focused on the leadership, as you know. I've calmed down a lot, but I had a lot of sacred rage at one point, just being so offended on a soul level, right? I call it sacred rage, where it's just like, how dare you treat humanity like this? Like,
Mhm.
as you know, I'm not a big fan of people abusing their power and all of the things. But we can't, I think as much as we want to prepare, and I think it's good to prepare, I think preparing gives us peace of mind. And if we can close a loop in our brain of something we need to worry about that we no longer need to worry about because we've got that checked, right? Like I, for example, have a ton of organic non-GMO seeds that I might use to grow my own stuff, but it's also something really great I can trade with if I need to, right? At some point,
Mhm.
I've built my local infrastructure of people. We all have each other's backs. I've diversified my seas, right? So I have a variety of different ways, depending on how they go with things, to take care of business, so to speak. I have skills that I can trade, and my husband does as well. But I think as much as we try to prepare, really we're here for spiritual mastery. This is why we're
Mhm.
here, especially if we're awake. So if we can keep doing what we have always done, actually, even before 2020, which is just get up every day and act as though the world isn't going to come to an end. We have had no choice but to just get on with life and live as though we're here to live, right? And so if we're here for spiritual mastery, how do we extract our consciousness from the circus act and focus on elevating consciousness, focus on evolving our soul, focus on what we're coded to do. When I last night I went to bed and I thought, oh wow, like I'm usually pretty good at not letting them have my consciousness. But the last few years, of course, for most of us, right, we have had to pay attention to what's going on. Over the last month or so, I'm just not paying as much attention. And I realized, yeah, like this is my life. I'm aware of what's going on. I'm aware of who's pulling the puppet strings, etc. And I will need to be mindful, of course, as they keep changing the things on the world stage, which we know they'll do more of. But I'm really trying to extract my consciousness from them because they'll just capture it forever, right? Like you were talking before about the fear porn and stuff. They're they want us destabilized. We're easier to control. They want us focusing on what they're doing because they think they're putting on the best show in the world. Trump even told us that, right? Like enjoy the show. And people interpreted that differently than what he actually meant it. But anyways, that's kind of my verbal diarrhea, but I'm actually curious to hear what you have to say because I know you have your theories too and some things that you've seen around that.
Yeah, I I think that, like, The one of the things that they've been using, one of the tactics that they've been using for a long time that they continue to use is that like we are such powerful creators. Like we have this ability to connect with higher dimensional pre-matter templates of energy and translate them into reality. I mean, that's like the benefit of being in this realm. I really believe that's why we come, for the thrill of taking pre-matter and turning it into matter and then experiencing it. But when we're in a state of fear, when they keep us in these low frequency loops, not only do they get to harvest our loosh energy and feed themselves off of it, but they also, as you said, like we're so much easier to control. They can then feed us through predictive programming what they want us to manifest. And we're in survival and in trauma responses, like lower chakra trauma. And so you can't be a creator and be in survival at the same time, a conscious creator. It's like it's like working with this tiny narrow bandwidth of what is actually accessible. Whereas when we're free of trauma, we can access those higher dimensions and bring them down into reality. But what we're doing is we're watching the shit they pump out through the news, through entertainment media, through like our spectacles, such as sports shows, like you were talking about. We're taking in all these symbols, performing unknowingly performing all these rituals that they've created for us. And we are, through our reticular activating system, we're like taking it inward, cycling it through ourselves, and then like rendering it outward into a manifested reality. That's the reality that they want, not the reality that we want. And I just think, I don't know, I have definitely been called over the last probably 4 to 6 months. I think it was when I started having like big autoimmune flare ups in October, and it kind of necessitated that I brought like all of my focus inward towards myself and really like became really mindful of what I was giving my attention to and what things were, causing me extra stress that I didn't need to be feeling. And I noticed how many hooks I had in the narrative, how many places that I was like leaking my own energy and feeding it with the currency of my attention. And I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges right now is to not put your head in the sand. So it's like the balance of being aware of things, but at the same time, as you said, like waking up and focusing on spiritual mastery, waking up and not just being in a state of continual responding to what they are giving us to respond to, but actually creating something authentic to ourselves. And that's a really big challenge. And I feel like we just we're only accessing the tip of the iceberg of what we're actually capable of doing. But it's a process of extricating ourselves from the netting that they have created for us to keep us sort of at their level. That's how it feels to me. I'm curious if you have any like galactic memories or anything, like any soul memories, like when you were talking about the cataclysmic events, the things that you've seen, like things falling from the sky, it made me think of the movie Don't Look Up that was released on Christmas Eve on Netflix about a meteor life on Earth. Yeah, it was actually a really good movie. But it had Leo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence, and I just found it as soon as it came out and I saw the preview, I was like, yeah, this is predictive programming. Like they're seeding our consciousness with these outcomes. And I don't know which one is going to take. I think they're seeding us with different ones. And, kind of the way like if you're planting a garden and you're sowing them from seeds, like you don't know which seeds are going to grow. So you're going to plant multiple seeds and you'll thin it out and you'll direct your garden as things start to take root and grow. But when you were talking about that, I also thought about, our memories of Atlantis. I'm having a lot of Lemurian memories coming through. And then there are also like galactic memories of times that we've been through similar loops, similar processes. Do you
Mhm.
have any of those things come through for you?
Oh, for sure. You might remember at the beginning of all of this, I was on the phone with my financial advisor when they officially not announced the first lockdown. And we all remember the good old days of the 2 weeks to flatten the curve because people were fighting on the internet with each other about this is the time to take guitar lessons. No, this is the time to rest. This is how you should spend your 2 weeks. No,
Like,
this is how you should, look at how much the planet's cleaned up. You should be like, there was all the bullshit, right? And, but meanwhile, when I heard, because I was seeing it play out, and many of us knew that this was coming, 20 or 30 years ago, but you don't really, there's a part of your brain that's like, no, we'll never let
mhm.
that happen. No, humanity will rise up. We'll put an end to this before it happens. So then when they were talking about this virus already, and I could see people getting so hyped up about what was happening on another side of the world, for those of us that live in like Europe and North America and so on. And I thought, oh, like, because I just don't pay attention to the news at all. I haven't had a TV for years. And, they tried this shit with bird flu and whatever else they've launched on the people, right? So when I was on the phone with him and out of my mouth, so this wasn't really me or my conscious self, I said, those fuckers, I thought I already took care of, not because it's all about me, but I had this distinct Atlantean memory of putting these guys in their place, right? These controllers that, they go through, we'll say reincarnation as well, right? And just thinking like, God, I thought we were already taking care of them. You're back again. What do you do? What do you want now? Like, don't you get tired of this cat and mouse game with humanity? Like, just leave us alone. Let us be at peace, kind of thing, right? So at the time, the guide showed me that this was the Orion Wars completing themselves, right? And kind of coming to a head again, so to speak, to be finally resolving itself one way or the other. We can definitely see that. It's interesting to see like there's a lot of quote unquote awake people that are very excited about this and very excited to take the poison because they view it as a galactic upgrade. They're running out to get their boosters because they actually believe that they're getting a DNA upgrade and it's just being masked a certain way because humans can't fathom that we're all going to be going to Mars. That by taking the poison, that it's going to calibrate our DNA so that we can all go in transit to Mars and live the rest of our human existence on Mars.
That's very interesting.
And I only know this because one of my friends was like, hey, I became friends with this woman and she started saying this and she's really been encouraging me to get the thing. And she's super excited about it. I guess it's been talked about in circles for like 10 or 15 years. That the reason why they're releasing it under a health crisis instead of being honest and saying, look, the planet's going to collapse. We're all going to go live on Mars instead is because humanity's consciousness and their general, like their actual brains wouldn't be able to handle it. So they have to mask the real issue with a fake virus in order to get us to take a jab so that we can all be saved, so no one's left behind, so that our vibration is calibrated to go and live on Mars. And I'm like, oh wow, that's some next level nonsense right there, right? So, and I think that happens because we see how much they send in scouts and they send in deceivers, right? Into our speech.
Mhm.
Like we pose the greatest risk to them because we are so powerful in being able to transmute the energy that they have to keep throwing in all of these like bullshit narratives, right? And
Mhm.
hijacking people. And it makes sense that people would buy this. Look at all the people that believe Nasara and Jasara is actually a thing and that it's a good thing for humanity, right? That's because they have penetrated the lightworker community in getting us to believe in all these things and how it's not spiritual to have things and that if you want true enlightenment, you don't own things and you just, wear your white robe and become a breatharian basically, right? And by unity consciousness, there's so much out there. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's interesting to see what our consciousness latches onto and what vibrational matches we call in based on what we believe.
Mhm. Mhm. That's so interesting. I mean, I hadn't heard that Mars theory, and my brain is just like it that doesn't track with me. I call it like we have to filter everything through our own internal truthometer and our own internal bullshitometer, and that just does not track with me at all. I just see all this evidence that like, mm, none of this is for our well-being. No,
Yeah.
none of it. None of it's for our well-being. And like, why would we go to Mars? That doesn't make any sense. So, okay, so to the conversation about infiltration
Hmm.
in the light worker community, I definitely have noticed this, and it's so challenging, right? Because like you don't really want to call out people because you don't want to invite that kind of drama into, like, I don't want to drop names and then invite that person, accusing me of, what's the word? Defamation, character defamation,
Hmm.
or slander, or anything like that. Or I just don't even want that kind of drama. But and the important thing too, I think, is that
I'm not laughing at you. I'm like, I call them out all the time.
I know you do. I know. You're so bold. But the interesting thing too is, I think, like, we all have to everybody has to feel that level of discernment for ourselves too,
Mhm.
right? Like, we have to get good at reading the signs for ourselves, because what good is it if, you know, you, like, say, for example, if somebody's like, well, I don't know, and I feel totally, taken aback. And so I'm going to latch on to Jennifer because she does call people out. And I'm going to, like, blindly listen to Jennifer.
Mhm.
The the goal is for all of us to develop our own discernment, like, to be able to feel that vibrational shift within ourselves, that even somebody, and the hard part is sometimes it's people we love. Like, I remember in 2020, I was learning things about the Beatles that I was like, I wish I didn't know
Mhm.
this. Like, this hurts me. This hurts, like, the construct I had created, and, like, memories I have around my family and growing up, and, like, it's painful to have those things, yeah, spoiled, I guess, but it's also important to be able to see it with clear eyes, and feel that and use it to hone a greater level of discernment. What are do you have any do you have any suggestions? Is there anything that you found to help people cultivate that discernment?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. So just to back up, yeah, like so I created a webinar called How to Decode the Matrix so you can outcreate it. I'm not promoting it. It's like I'm really not trying to be the person that decodes the matrix. I'm really focused on elevating wealth consciousness for spiritual entrepreneurs that are choosing the 5D timeline. I don't want to hang out on that energy all the time. It's heavy. It's annoying. I used to be a forensic investigator, so my investigative mind just can't help but see stuff, right? And see patterns and so on. So, in that webinar, I go over the meta level principles of how the matrix works, how the controllers work, so that you can filter everything through that rule number one. Everything that we know because the controllers have told us that this is what the truth is. So, we can reasonably assume that there's some degree of distortion in everything we know about medicine, science, planets, weather, global warming, like anything you could imagine, right? Religion, especially. And I'm a big basher of religion, not people that believe in it, but the way that it's constructed and what it's created for. In that, I do expose probably about I'm going to say about 30 people in the lightworker community that people would think are on their side. Someone like JP Sears, Phil Good, Lori Ladd, Teal Swan, a few people like that. Happy to share that. You can sue me for defamation if you want, and we will expose it in court. But we know it's not getting to court because there's not going to really be courts that much longer. So, that being said, the reason why I expose that stuff is again because I am coded. I'm literally coded in my human design to call out abuse of power, and it is offensive to me when people like you and I and the rest of you listening, when we are committed to elevating consciousness, that when we have these infiltrators come in trying to distort consciousness, right? We are giving them, like you said, the currency of our attention, at the very least, our energy, our time, and oftentimes our financial resources. So if I can spare someone investing any of their precious resources, particularly their hard-earned money, into paying for continued programming, then I'm happy to do that. That being said, I the reason why I did that webinar and I'm not going to keep talking about this stuff, meaning the way that I used to, is because I do expect people to give enough shits about what's happening on the planet to go and do their own research. and be impeccable stewards of their consciousness and be mindful. Like at this point, we all know that Netflix has become the new TV, right? It's
Mm.
become the new form of programming. And holy cow, did they ever program the shit out of people, right?
Yeah.
So if we're going to keep watching Netflix, knowing what we know, well, then, you're going to have to work harder at being a clear channel. I'm not saying we can't be entertained. I was very clear that I went to a Blue Jays game knowing damn well what they're all about. I went in with eyes wide open. I think when it comes to Netflix, if you think that our brain is moving from left brain to right brain every 20 minutes, we are already suggestible to programming every 20 minutes,
Hmm.
regardless of how awake you are. And we're usually watching those things when we're trying to numb out. We're probably way more in our theta brain waves anyways when we're watching that stuff. So we're just more susceptible to coding. So it doesn't mean don't watch it. It means, and I'm using Netflix as an example, but this is Disney Plus, Prime, whatever the hell else is on the TV now. We know what it's designed to do. So if if our goal is to numb out, then we want to ask why that is. Right. The focus really is on creating, similar to what you shared, right? In the law of polarity, as things are being destroyed, there's an equal amount of things being created. If we want to outcreate this, which we already can do as infinite creator beings, then we just stay in the energy of creation, creating just because we can create more joy, create more happiness, create more rest, create more money, create more impact, create more whatever the hell. I don't care if you make finger puppets or whatever you're doing, staying in the energy of creation is what's going to get us through this. So the Akashic records are a big deal. And I remember in 2020, there were a few Akashic record teachers with a different system that were going on and on about this is a virus and how selfish. And I can't believe how many spiritual people who claim to be awake are trying to make this other than a virus. What's the big deal? Go and protect your fellow humans. Wear a mask. Well, I'm like, holy shit, there is no way you are channeling the Akashic records. There is no way you're a clear channel
Hmm.
if that's what you're picking up on. And that's okay if that's what you're picking up on and you're going to attract a very different type of person, right? But when we're in the records, whether we want it or not, we're only going to be given the truth. And
Hmm.
there's very few people, as we know, as evidenced by what we've witnessed over the last few years, there's a very small percentage of people that are willing to look truth in the eyes, regardless of how convenient or inconvenient it is, right? Whereas you and I are very open. We're very aware of what's going on to the degree that we can. There's a lot that's still in secrecy, as we know. But of the things that we do know, it hasn't been all that fun, right? In a lot of ways, but at least we can make an informed decision about where we want to put our energy. We have a better sense of our spiritual mastery and all kinds of things because we're willing to lean into that. So we have to be impeccable stewards of our consciousness. So impeccable stewards of our health, our vitality, really minimizing like being a creator on social media instead of a consumer, looking for all the ways that we can get out of any sort of hypnotized state, right? And also being mindful of our food. We know that even astrology wise, they've said that there's going to be an increase in poisoning of our food this year, and we can see that. We're seeing what happened with all the baby formula. I don't know to the degree which that is even true. Meaning, like, I know there was a shortage, but we know that was orchestrated, right? And it's rather interesting to me that the government is now controlling baby formula, right? Like
Hmm.
the the people, the powers that be, are magically now creating this and going back in the grocery stores because for a long time I didn't go. I just ordered my food and picked it up because I don't always have a filter when it comes to the public. I have been known to say things to people during these last 2 years. Not intentionally, it kind of comes out. So for my benefit and to avoid ending up in jail, not really, I'm just joking. I haven't gone into grocery stores because I was very disappointed in humanity, honestly. And so going in there now and seeing these huge sections dedicated to substitute meat,
Yeah.
like nobody sees that as an issue. Nobody sees that as an issue.
Well, and I love that you're saying this because you're a vegan and you've
Yeah.
been a vegan for a long time. So this isn't an issue of like, we're very easily led off into the weeds of arguing about how somebody should eat or shouldn't eat for like ascension and health and, blah blah blah. But I have felt for a long time that the beyond meat, the meat substitutes, because I have so many food allergies, so I can't eat them at all. They're mostly made of isolated pea protein, but they often have a lot of cornstarch, a lot of highly processed and toxic, frankly, very toxic ingredients in them. And I've just known this because of my own health journey. And I I look at it and I'm like, this is such an agenda. And so it was no surprise to me to find out that I think it's like Bill Gates is, a big, I don't know, like Beyond Meat is
Mhm,
one of his things. And it's really refreshing to hear you talk about it as a vegan, that it's not about like what somebody should eat or shouldn't eat. It's just calling out like, this is poison. It's being marketed as food, but it's not food. It's
mhm,
poison
mhm,
that we're being convinced to eat. And we're being told that it helps the planet and there's less cruelty involved. And furthermore, that we can ascend faster because we don't have the density of animal products in our bodies. But it's actually just poison. That's how I see it.
mhm. Which is hilarious in a non-hilarious way coming from cannibalistic child rapists and mutilators, right? Like, and all the blood sacrifice that they get into that they would give a shit about cruelty, right? Like that's really a typical inversion on their part. But yeah, like and I will say this for everyone, like I don't care what people eat. I'm just saying like be mindful of what's going in your food because they put even especially well, even if you look at our supplements, the amount of mold and fungus they put in vitamin C, like they're telling everyone to increase their vitamin C and then they're just shoveling a bunch of mold unknowingly into their body and stuff, right? So for me, as a vegan, so very shortly after I became vegan, then I became raw vegan. I was raw vegan for a really long time. I'm still kind of 50-50. I try not to cook too much of my food because I want the enzymes intact, right? I want the complete aura around my food. But people get so weird about being vegan. They're like, even my son, he'll be eating ice cream, and I don't want any of these things. Keep in mind, he's not my biological son, so the limitation of what I'm able to contribute to certain parenting decisions and what I'm not is just a little bit, just letting people know. Because if I was able to be making different decisions, I would. That being said, he might be eating a bowl of ice cream or something, and then he'll kind of get weepy, and I'm like, "What's wrong, buddy?" He's like, "Well, I wish you could have this. It's so good." It's like, "Well, I've had it before. I remember how it tastes. I don't need to keep eating something to remember how it tastes." When I look at vegan hot dogs, like, do I really miss hot dogs that much that I'm gonna go eat like vegan hot dogs or tofurkey or any of this stuff? Like I don't even eat any of that shit. It's so disgusting. Like, I don't know about you, but I've maybe tried 3 or 4 veggie burgers in my life, not the Beyond Meat ones, but like actual at vegan restaurants. They are disgusting. I have zero interest like I didn't like burgers that much when I ate meat. I definitely don't need to be eating them now. The the journey that I've been on is my point is to really look at food for what it is, which is medicine. What do I need to put in my body to give the body? What is my body consciousness? So this is another thing, right? When we keep the channel clear, we're able to say, well, what does my body consciousness want? How does it want to move? How does it want to be nourished? Just because I feel like I need vitamin C, am I actually muscle testing things to see if my body is responding well to that type of vitamin C? Maybe I'll read the label and go, oh, look at that hidden product in there. That's interesting. So, but keeping as much poison as I can out of my body, given the fact that we're exposed to so many chemtrails and so many other things, right? And stuff that they put in our clothes and, all the things, even like a lot of the natural health products, toothpaste and stuff have all been bought out by these larger companies, right? That are owned, as we know. So our vitality is what's going to get us through this because we've been in surge capacity now for 2.5 years. We're only designed to be in that for like a maximum of, let's say, 28 to 48 hours or 24 to 48 hours, right? That would be like a gunman's chasing after you and you get surge capacity to outrun the gunman. And then your body should be given an opportunity to calm down and go and to regulate itself. But we have been in surge capacity now for 2.5 years. Even though a lot of the mandates are lifted, we're still anticipating something else happening. We know something else is going to happen on the world stage. That much we can know for certain. We just don't know what it is. And so we have to rest more. We have to be mindful of what we're putting into our body because our body is our partner in this journey. If we're not taking care of it, then, it's just going to be a lot different for us.
Hmm. Totally. I my body insisted that I get on board with this, so I can really relate. It just absolutely put its foot down in October and was like, cleanest food possible, like most sleep possible, clear out the channel completely.
Mhm. Yeah, even if you look at like especially in Canada, for those of us that are from Canada, like there's a company uh, called, oh, I can't even think of the main company. You'll think of it, Amy, but they make President's Choice food and they make a lot of organic stuff. But they also are in the business of manufacturing and distributing PCR tests, and they've been an active player in all this bullshit happening on the world stage, right? So a lot of these grocery store chains, and this will be true in any country, are just front-facing storefronts, basically, for the back-facing agenda. And so I'm to trust that an active controller, an active deceiver on the world stage says they put organic on their frozen like broccoli that says organic, and I'm supposed to believe that it's organic
Right. Totally.
because like if people are like, well, would they do that? Well, they've literally lied to us about everything. They constantly say things are organic when they're not, or they have one organic ingredient in them, like organic crackers or something, right? The rest of the ingredients are shit. But there's one thing in there that's certified organic, which really doesn't mean much. And then all of a sudden we're supposed to believe that, they're not deceptive, right?
Hmm.
We look at the foods that the FDA approves and the foods that they don't to think that approval or certification of organic matter is actually valid is kind of laughable at this point, right? So for me, I'm taking way more charge of of growing my own food, not because it's a money issue at all for me. It's because I want to be able to control what's going in my food
Hmm. Hmm. Totally.
and therefore in my body.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm looking at the clock. I know you have to go, but I mean, I feel like we only just scratched the surface
Yeah.
of this conversation. But is there anything that you would like to share with the audience in closing? Any interesting offers that you have coming up or ways to work with you or look into you further? Of course, all the links will be in the show notes or even just like a message. I know that you mostly are here to call out like powerful leaders and creators and just bring them even more into their power. I know this personally.
Well, I do have my Akashic Record Mastery program. That's like getting a PhD. Like that's really deep ascension technology that we're going into with the Akashic Record Mastery. I've been doing that for a long time, like doing the Akashic Records, I mean, for a long time. So for people that are just naturally in a growth mindset and they're really choosing the 5D timeline, that's something that can make sense. I'm happy to chat with people about that. As far as messages go, I think we want to remember a few divine truths, especially when they're amping up the fear porn, which is we are coded for this time. So therefore, we already have everything we need. Personally, I mean, right? We might not feel like we do, but we actually do. We have the right people in place. We have the level of consciousness and life experience and so on that supports us in this. And in that, vibrationally, none of us would be on this planet if we couldn't handle the vibration because the planet is vibrating at a much higher frequency than it would have a long time ago. So even the people that we think are asleep, that we're so desperately wanting to wake up, and how come you're not getting on board? On a spiritual level, they are divine beings. They're vibrating at the same frequency as us outside of their body. They wouldn't be able to be here if they weren't a vibrational match for what's happening on this planet. And just because we don't understand that they're coded to be asleep until such time as they may be woken up, and they may not be because they might be coded to focus on mastering 3D. And so they have to make choices that allow them to stay aligned to the 3D timeline because that is their spiritual mastery in this lifetime. It's not our job to wake people up. It's our job to keep elevating our own frequency. That is what elevates consciousness.
Hmm.
We can keep focusing on what's going on with other people, but that's just an unconscious, misdirected need. And the need is to control. The more fearful we are, the more we try to control our outer circumstances. I don't mean we're all control freaks. I just mean that's something that all humans will do when they feel out of control. They'll unconsciously misdirect and attempt to try and control things outside of them when the desire is really to be centered in themselves. So if we can actually have compassion and divine detachment for them and say, okay, well, they're choosing that. It's not my business to know why some people are choosing to be asleep or my judgment of being asleep. What I do have control over is focusing on my own growth. And if I just keep raising my own frequency, that is the contribution. If I just keep getting clear on what I'm coded for this time, because we wouldn't be here if we weren't meant to be here, if that becomes my focus, then I actually have a pretty peaceful existence because I'm just staying in my lane.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I have also found in Akashic readings that I've done that exactly like you said, that some people are coded to be asleep until a certain time. One person's husband, I found that he is coded to be asleep until almost the last minute, but he's like providing really important, like very kind of like 3D data because, he has a higher self. He has like higher dimensional aspects of himself, and he is providing like intel unbeknownst to him on a conscious level from soul perspective. He is doing that. So we don't have to try and control things, micromanage people's awakening processes. That's perfect.
Oh, well, believe me, I tried with my husband. I was more of an asshole to him than he was to me, as far as like, what do you mean? If you go out and get that, you're not sleeping in my bed for 30 days. Get all over me. And then he came home after his first job. And my guy, it wasn't even me. My guides yelled in my ear, basically, like they bellowed in my ear. He's palliative now. Just love him. Those are not my words. I wasn't trying to find that. And that's where you really start to get clear on what matters, right? And realizing, yeah, like he chose that. There's no shortage of information out
Mm.
there on what's going on or what they're putting into their body or anything like that. So if that's what they're choosing, I have to be an allowance of that and really master these universal laws, like the universal law of free will, like the universal law of allowance, and let people be where they're at and just stay in my lane and keep worrying about my own frequency.
Yeah. Which is it's a tall order, isn't it? It definitely keeps us working every day.
Yes, indeed.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your perspective and your wisdom today, Jennifer. I really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It was fun. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, we will. There's deeper things to uncover. And thank you so much, beautiful audience, for your time and attention today. You know that I appreciate you so very much. I hope you have a beautiful day or night wherever you are, and I will catch you on the next episode. Whether you are just starting out on your spiritual awakening journey or you're ready to dive deep into activating your psychic gifts, I have a complete store ready for you to learn all the things that you are looking for answers to. I have light codes to upgrade and calibrate your consciousness. I have a class on the first 13 dimensions, a class on dark entities, a class on the human ego from a multidimensional perspective, and powerful modules and bundles on psychic activation, with more classes and courses being added all the time. In fact, I just added 3 classes about the Christ light frequency and the holographic field that have been selling like wildfire, and I get a ton of messages from people who appreciate this content. I truly love to serve you all, and I do my best to translate all the downloads and transmissions I receive from the Akashic Records into this library of information for you. You can find it all at amybelair.com/store. Enjoy! Thank you so much for being here with me on this episode. I appreciate you more than my words could ever say. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share, and I will catch you on the next episode.